In this digital research project video, I will be speaking about the Racist Anti-Immigration Act and discrimination history in America. In my argument to reserve jobs for white people, the U.S. government executed racist anti-immigration laws which are rooted in white supremacy and migrant-experienced racism and conflict in the multicultural society. Before I start to analyze the racist anti-immigration and discrimination history in America, I would like to explain the historical background based on my scholarly peer-reviewed secondary source such as book and journal article. According to the professor of ethnic study at CSUN, United States book, Asian Pacific American Experience, Past, Present, and Future, Chapter 3, The Struggle of Triumphs of Asian American in U.S. History, Asian Immigrant Prior to 1965. Strict economic conditions and political confusion pushed an American expansionism, and the gold rush pulled lots of immigrants to America from the late 19th century to early 20th century. Not only Asian, but also European, African, and Latino immigrated to the United States dreaming of lots of opportunities. The journal article published by Professor of History Brian Grattan at Arizona State University and Emily Merchant at the University of Michigan titled Immigration, Repatriation, and Deportation, the Mexican Origin Population in the U.S. 1920 to 1950 show us that numerous Latinos were forcibly repatriated to Mexico for a white job because of the Great Depression during the 1930s. In California, Mexican Americans were forcibly repatriated to Mexico even though lots of them had U.S. citizenship and were legal residents. The journal article by Dennis Sohony, professor of sociology at the University of Washington, titled Unsweetable Sweeter, Anti-Miscegenation Laws and Naturalization Laws, exposed how family formation of colored people was difficult because of racist policy and exclusionary laws during the 19th to early 20th centuries. Especially in the early 20th century, xenophobia and racial hierarchy discriminated against colored people and immigrants to protect the racial purity of white and prevent the formation of minority groups. For this project, I used two primary sources and three types of scholarly peer-reviewed secondary sources, which were already mentioned for introducing the historical background. In this historical document written in 1882, found in National Archive and Record Administration, we checked the information of the anti-immigration law called the Chinese Exclusion Act was passed by U.S. Congress and signed by the President. The U.S. Congress originally produced a source on May 6, 1882. The purpose of the sources produced was that the U.S. government were restricting immigrants, especially Chinese, to protect jobs for white. When there was a lot of discrimination against colored people, many immigrants had employment disadvantage and fewer job opportunities. Let's look at the documentary film titled The Lost Tape Episode 2 LA Riot, which was directed by Tom Jennings in 2017. I found it on the Smithsonian Channel on YouTube. This documentary showed the oral interview of the resident, Judge Joyce Collin, and Shivdari Gate, a Korean radio record, news report, and video record from the Los Angeles Police Department, which are primary source about the LA riot in Los Angeles in April 1992. Los Angeles Police Department and lots of broadcast stations originally produced these sources. The purpose of the news report and interview was to inform the violent situation during the LA riot, the reason for the riot, and the damage and solution to them. Also, the documentary, which has diverse primary sources, was produced to inform the racist history in America that has led to negative consequences and need to reforming justice for peaceful American society. We will analyze the history of race, class, and xenophobia with these sources. First, anti-immigration law. According to primary written source, the resolution of Congress about the Chinese Exclusion Act, only 3% of each nationality already living in the United States could enter America. The Chinese Exclusion Act is an inaugural act and resolution of the U.S. Congress that restricted immigration into the United States in 1882. The first wave of immigration to America was lots of sojourners to make money. So there was an anti-Asian sentiment because Americans thought the Chinese immigrants were stealing jobs from white workers and the presence of Chinese female prostitutes, which was sexual impurity. According to the scholarly peer-reviewed secondary written source, Brian Grattan's journal article, Immigration, Repatriation, and Deportation, the Mexican Origin Population in the United States, 1920 to 1950, approximately 500,000 Latinos were coercibly repatriated from the United States during the 1930s. Because of Great Depression, hostility to immigrants has increased and violent deportation has occurred. The deportation process in which the warrant was issued was a great pressure and threat to Mexican Americans, and this factor led them to move to Mexico even though they were legal residents. The interesting is that the U.S. Congress and the government discrimination against colored people, especially Asian immigrants and Latinos, to create white jobs. Even a Mexican American with citizenship was repatriated to Mexico. According to the both anti-immigration law mentioned above, the victims are colored people, which means the U.S. society has racial discrimination and white supremacy ideology, which tells us about the history of race and xenophobia in America. Second, racist law and colorism. According to scholarly peer-reviewed secondary research source Danish Sohonius journal article, Unswitchable Switcher Anti-Miscegenation Law, Naturalization Law, and the construction of Asian identity, anti-miscegenation law was aimed to protect the idea of white racial purity. Anti-miscegenation law prohibited marrying between white and colored people. This racist law against colored people revealed the exploitative and oppressive use of American law. The white supremacy ideology that colored people as inferior to white Americans at the time tell us about the dark history of race and class in America. According to the scholarly peer-reviewed secondary research source United States book Asian Pacific American Experience, Past, Present, and Future, Part 6 Media Portrayal and Stereotype Immigrant Experience, and Part 10 Intergroup Relation and Hate Violence, media portrayal of rooted in racist colorism. Media reflected Asian as an alien and perpetual foreigner, African as a harm to lower, cheaper, and blue-collar workers, and Latinos as gangster and drug dealer at the time. Misrepresentation in media interrupt immigrants to have cultural citizenship and occur hate crime. Proposition 187, which prevent immigrants to receive public service, and Vincent Chen's case are examples of racist violence. Immigrants who dream of better life and opportunity experience more racial discrimination and inequality, which is based on ethnic hierarchy in America. Based on white supremacy, spreading false stereotypes about immigrants through the media and gaining support from white for racial politics is an interesting factor in examining dark history of the United States. After the 1965 Hart-Celler Act, lots of immigrants came to America and black communities lost their influence. Business of ethnic minority in different ethnic backgrounds frequently caused to occur racial conflict. This conflict led to mutual misunderstanding, prejudice, and process in discriminatory, unequal American economic structure. 1970 deindustrialization and the investment decline of secondary industry put blacks in dire economic straits. Moreover, racial politics and multi-minority myths increased the conflict between minority groups. According to scholarly peer-reviewed secondary research source United States book Asian Pacific American Experience, Past, Present, and Future, Part 5, Education and the Multi-Minority Myths, multi-minority is often laced with foreign racialization. Multi-minority myth was used to faulty assumption problem with racial lumping through the aggregated data and justify an entire system of race and class inequality in U.S. society. Finally, police brutality and broken justice were shown through the Rodney King's case, which was one of the cases of the LA riots. This news report and interview show the tense moment of the LA riot. This primary visual source show what happened in the Los Angeles in 1992. The part of documentary film titled The Lost Tape Episode 2 LA Riot, which was directed by Tom Jennings in 2017. We can see the devastating consequence of racism and economic damage to color and immigrants.
I came from the ghetto too! You mad the white man! Why destroy my business?
Through this visual record, we can realize the American class inequality and racism caused the LA riot and made it worse. Therefore, this source is related to the history of race and class in this project. Interestingly, discrimination and inequality against black people lead to LA riot, but the damage was done to many immigrant and non-white people. In fact, many police were protecting white people's residential area, and Korean immigrants in Koreatown had to protect themselves. Today, equality and right justice are considered very important. Discrimination by race, class, and status is most prohibited and terrible things in America today. This primary and scholarly secondary source which help us to know racism and anti-immigration history in America are important because it reminds us that these tragic things should never happen again. These sources help us to reflect on racial issues in present day and the danger of racial discrimination. According to these sources, participating in American politics, anti-racism, and civil rights movement help to resolve the racial issue in the present. The United States is a multicultural society where all races should be respected and there should be no discrimination based on skin color and immigration.